All right, everybody. It's Brian for Breaking Down Security. Mr. Betcher and Ms. Berlin. Miss Berlin may join me a little bit later. Mr. Betcher, we're recording this the week before a major holiday, and so he's probably out doing family things. So we're gonna let him do that. I have a guest, John DiMaggio. Welcome to our stream, our broadcast, if you will.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Cool. So I reached out to John. Oh, I don't know, about a month ago, which is actually pretty good because some of our guests that we have on is a couple months in the making. So John had mentioned on his Twitter that he had a new book out called "The Art of Cyberwarfare," and as we are wont to do when authors are posting up new thoughts and new ideas, and they're we've had no shortage of authors on the show. So I thought, let's reach out to John and get him on the show. So, John, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you taking the time. I understand you've got a conference that you're going to be at tomorrow, and we want to make sure that you get a good night's sleep. So when you're talking, we'll be able to get you on. So, uh, maybe you could give us a little background on who you are and what you do, and why you thought the book needed to be written.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, I started my career out. I was a network engineer, a Cisco guy. So I transitioned in security, but it was on the network side. Hardening networks, firewall administration, things like that. And as a hobby of mine, I was really into sort of doing open source research, and one thing kind of led to another, and it was I would say it was in the early 2000s. I think the first thing that got my attention was Iran and a lot of their hacktivist groups that just seemed to be a little too good for what most hacktivists are, and I kind of had a feeling that they might have ties to the government. So in my spare time, my friends were watching football, and I was geeking out on the computer. So I created a blog, just a WordPress blog, and I started throwing stuff up there. And several years later, I ended up getting recruited to go work for the U.S. government. I became a signals intelligence analyst. It was a great time to come in. It was right around when China was first sort of graduating their first class that began conducting espionage primarily against the United States at that point. So they had lots of intelligence analysts, but not lots of intelligence analysts with a cyber background. So with this new program, it was basically, they felt like I'd be a good fit because that is easier to teach intelligence than it was to teach current analysts, all the cyber aspect of it. So I came in at a great time. I was super interested. It was a hobby, and I just sort of never looked back. And I did that for a number of years. 2014, I got out of that, decided I wanted to go in the private sector. At that point, Sony had been hit, a number of banks, financial institutions were getting popped. And it was just, I felt like there wasn't a lot of people with expertise in the nation state espionage arena. So I felt like it was a great time to jump to the private sector. Really scary leaving all the secret squirrel tools. I can tell you it made me a much better analyst going from having everything to nothing. And,
Right.
I've even to this day, even though I have lots of resources through my day job, I still like go back, like open source tools are still, one of my, part of my daily workflow. So, and now I found myself really transitioning a lot these past, I'd say 2 or 3 years into ransomware. These guys, I feel like they used to read our reports that we used to put out publicly, we meaning the security community, about nation state attacks, and they sort of took all those TTPs and they put it into what they do today, because they're very similar, unfortunately, and advanced like we saw, nation states of the past. So that's sort of where I am. I work for Analyst One. I'm the chief security strategist. But at the end of the day, I chase bad guys and I write about it, and talk about it publicly. So
Okay.
the book was
Very
a
cool.
hobby, though. It was a hobby. The book was separate, but obviously that, it falls in line with my job. But yeah, it was my
Right.
hobby.
Okay. Very cool. So I'm like I said, I'm glad you were here. So the subtitle on the book says "An Investigator's Guide to Espionage, Ransomware, and Organized Crime." So you're going beyond just typical malware and ransomware and those to things like espionage. I mean, how much, and I guess we could not just espionage, but we could even expand that to insider threat or somebody
Sure.
taking bribes or what have you. But how prevalent is that in today's world?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's a great question. So, about 90% of the activity that a security operations center is going to see every year is your traditional to, low to mid-level threats, your automated cybercrime, automated malware delivered by spam, meaning it's not targeted, it's not going after something specific. That other 10% is, sort of your advanced, whether it be organized crime, like we see a lot of ransomware gangs, and of course, nation state espionage threats. And even though it's only that 10% is, when it happens, if it's handled incorrectly, is devastating. That's what puts headlines on newspapers. That's where people lose their jobs. That's where citizens lose all their private information, our healthcare records, you name it, it's happens. And throughout my career, one of the things that I have, it's actually much better. It's getting much better. But one of the things that I always struggled with was arguing with leadership about why we needed people to specialize in advanced threats and why we needed to treat them differently and handle them, because they're a completely different animal. You have human oriented attackers with an objective, with lots of time and resources, and you shut one door, they come through the window. You close the window, they jump over the fence in your backyard. They're not going to stop, at least not quickly. That's why they call them persistent threats.
right.
So what I did with the book is I sort of split it up into two parts. The first half of the book really just drives home both stories and some of them specific to my career, some of them just very important to the history of espionage, but really to drive home the point that I just made of what happens when you don't handle these correctly.
Right.
And then the second half, once we've really established that point, and sort of the reader understands that, the second half teaches analysts or investigators exactly how to go about doing various analytical workflows, what tools to use, how to do behavior profiling, how to build threat profiles, how to use do basic malware analysis, PCAP, and then puts everything together. And at the end, we apply everything we've learned with those resources, lots of open source tools in there as well, and we do the use case. And it involves APT28, which is a Russian GRU intelligence agency. It starts with one spear phishing email. One of the chapters I spent a lot of time teaching how to analyze the headers of emails. And anyway, we just
Okay.
go from that base email and just expand. And by the end of it, we've got a whole operation, and it really came together well. It made for a great use case to sort of wrap the whole book up.
Nice. Okay. So when I was in the military, one of the not just the anti-terrorism but the espionage stuff was the 30-year-old training videos with Gerald McRaney on them talking about the attack on the Kobar Towers and Robert Hansen being the bad guy
Yeah,
and how
saw the same
the
videos.
Russians yeah, how the Russians were uh, you know, giving him money to get secrets and stuff. Obviously, the motivations for espionage and insider threat are very similar to a corporate environment versus a military environment. Um, but things like patriotism, maybe not so much. There are not all of them overlap. I mean, what is the difference in what you see in the military with spies and military secrets and government secrets versus more corporate secrets? Is it just pretty much IP, or is it actually there's other motivators there for espionage or insider threat?
I would say at one point, not all that long ago, there was a significant difference, but I think today it's much more well blended. Today I feel like let's just go back to like 2014 when the Sony attack took place. That was really what got people's attention. It wasn't the first time a nation state attacked a private sector organization, but it's the first one that made global headlines. And I think that since then you've seen other nations, Iran, Russia, North Korea, do the same. They're all doing the same thing. And I think that it's easier to go after the private sector, who often have a lot of the same technologies and or build technologies that go into a lot of our defenses. It's easier to take that information from them than it was, per say, the government. Now that's getting a lot better because,
Right.
unfortunately, of all these events. So I would say, like, that's why I said it's not as it's much more even keel as to how it used to be, because it is harder now to get into a lot of those networks. But these guys are just, one of the reasons I really like doing work with advanced threat is they're so interesting, and they're very creative, and you've really got to be an out of the box thinker, and you've really got to come to work every day excited about what you're doing, and feel like literally like you're hunting for bad guys, because that's how you find these type of threats. So these guys, they lay low, they'll take time. Just quick example: North Korea, the very well-known bank attack they did against the Bank of Bangladesh. And in that attack, they started a year prior to the day that they actually tried to execute fraudulent transactions. A year prior. I mean, most cyber criminals won't spend that much time. So they're like I said, they're just a different animal. They're a different breed of an attacker, and we just have to treat them that way. But it absolutely, what sort of that patience and that well-resourced activities and groups that we used to see just targeting the government. I would say before, where it was very easy, like with Anthem Healthcare, when they got hit, they got in very easily to that. It didn't take them a year to get in. Today, I guarantee you, most of the healthcare companies do a lot better job than they would have then. So it definitely, we've sort of upped our game in the private sector, and we have a lot more, quote unquote, experts, people that have a background similar to mine, to sort of help out with that. And I feel like we're fighting the fight. We're not necessarily winning as much on the criminal side of the ransomware gangs, but I think we're doing a much better job with the espionage aspect.
Yeah. Okay, so going back to talking about the espionage stuff, I actually work at an organization where we have an insider threat team for
Yep.
um, there's a lot of folks that see, like you see the cop shows and are like, oh, internal affairs, you're the bad cops trying to stop bad cops from doing stuff, that kind of stuff. You there's a stigma about the insider threat team, or the
There
the trying to make sure that bad guys aren't in our organization, but in doing so, they often will get a bad rap because it's like they're always trying to find something on somebody or trying to dig up dirt. Um, how would you frame the conversation if you have a company large enough to have an insider threat team to go to your organization and say, look, insider threat is real. We're a company big enough to have insider threat issues. And of course somebody counters with, well, if we can't trust our employees, then, we don't really have a company and stuff. And it's like, how do you frame that to senior management or to C-level folks when they counter with that kind of argument?
Well, first off, you hit it right on the head. Insider threat programs they get a bad rap, for whatever reason. That compared to other threats, people, they don't take it as seriously, or they think that it's not going to happen. And I think the way that you combat that today is there are some really good examples. For one, there are ransomware gangs that are literally recruiting people to give them access to corporate networks.
Mm.
We have a number of examples. We can go back again. Let's go back to 2014. It was one of the Mandiant's Fin groups. I don't remember which one, but these guys went into a company, and what they did was kind of ingenious. It was terrible for the company, but they didn't actually steal anything. They went in and they stole their communications so they could learn what the company was going to do. And then they used it to short the stock. They used the information to short the stock, and they made a ton of money doing it. Very illegal, but they still made millions of dollars of doing it. So, in that instance, that's how they got in, was an employee. So whether
Right.
it's cybercrime, whether it's ransomware, it's getting much more popular, if you will, because it used to be the insider might do it because they're disgruntled. Today, they're doing it
Right.
because there's a organized criminal organization that's offering them millions of dollars to stick a USB drive into a computer, or to give them administrative credentials. And we catch some of them, but I mean, I guarantee you, there's ones that get away with it that we don't know about. There was that doctor just recently who was working with a ransomware gang, and it affected
Yeah.
hospitals and patients. I mean, it was terrible. So there's
Right.
so many examples now, but that mentality is still there. But to answer your question, there's so many examples now. I feel like we have a lot more to come to the table with that argument with, which would just leave somebody looking a little bit silly who's trying to argue that doesn't happen in this day and age.
Right. Yeah, I actually I put a URL in our chat and in the Zoom
Mhm.
chat there where Perluigi from Security Affairs had mentioned Lapsus is openly, recruiting for insiders in various organizations. And the thing that I've got is they they have very few requirements, which is great for when you're trying to hire somebody. Wait, that's not the right way to go with that. But if I w usually they need, 3-year degree, and in
Right.
5 years for a junior position and stuff. So, they're actually writing a good job description here. But if I was any of the companies on this list that they're targeting, I would be worried. Not
Yeah.
just from the insider threat, organization, but it's like freaking obviously Microsoft, Apple, of course, IBM or similar. So, um I would be worried being called out specifically in these organizations, especially like AT&T or Telefonica or what have you. And this is the most brazen that I think I've ever seen. I don't know. I assume this is on something like Mastodon or what have you. But yeah, it's just really interesting how brazen they are on these things.
Right. Well, look at Conti. I mean, with the Costa Rica government, that's how they got into that. According to them, they say that
Yeah.
insiders to do that. I really think out of all of the areas of the threat space, that is probably I would say second to ransomware as far as growth in criminal activities, where we're seeing a rise because it just feeds that ecosystem right now, and it's easy to get people. And the problem with companies is you can do background checks all day. I could be a great employee, but that doesn't mean that a year from now, somebody offering me, 500 grand or $1 million or whatever, just to give them my credentials, that I'm not going to say, okay, like you don't know what people are going to do is my point. So
Yeah.
having programs like what you're talking about, what you do, like that it's imperative. And it's kind of like, I feel like insider threat is like where sort of that advanced threat or espionage response used to be years ago, where people just discounted it. I feel like that's sort of insider threat. Like people still want to argue that. And I think that, 5 years from now, that's not going to be an argument. But I feel like today we're still having that argument, which is crazy to me, which is why
Right.
we have so many headlines about it, because we're getting our asses kicked with it.
Yeah. So for organizations that have to deal with insider threat, are there technologies that they could employ? I'm thinking, like some kind of behavioral
Yeah.
heuristics, or I mean, back in the day, it used to be, well, we would just turn off all of our Windows NT boxes. You're not logging in after 5 p.m., so nobody should be logging in after 5 p.m. unless it's, somebody specific, or, looking for logins at an odd hour, or why did Bob come in, or why is Bob staying late? That was the military stuff. It was like the military training. It was like,
Right.
if anybody's coming in super late or staying super, early, or coming in super early. And I was like,
Right.
well, nowadays that's somebody who likes to work 80 hours a week, not necessarily an
Right.
insider threat, because we don't limit people coming into work anymore. So
Right. Right.
what
Exactly.
kind of technologies can people employ, especially if they don't have an insider threat team to work on and look for insider threats? I mean, obviously, if you know everybody in your small startup company, it may not be the same as if it's, a 30,000 person company or a small to medium
Right.
business.
I mean, it's sort of a multiple parts to this. I mean, the perfect answer is, well, let me give you that first, would be to have some sort of a EDR that sort of monitors the endpoint activity and what's going on your network and what's going in and out, and the day-to-day uh, keystrokes by administrators and what tools they're using and things like that. But that alone, doesn't work. So sort of the EDR, most of those today are based on artificial intelligence and threat modeling and things like that. That's fantastic. But even with that, because I was a threat hunter, even with that, you still need humans to go in. And a perfect example is, because if it is an insider threat, a lot of times you're going to have someone with legitimate credentials doing things on a network that might look like your regular day-to-day activity. But then you notice something like, why are they running PowerShell commands that are base 64 encoded? What are
Right.
these guys doing? And that's what it's not going to pop up as an alert like, hey, this is bad necessarily, because it fits a normal business profile or behavior, but having a human being go and look and see what they're doing, and that's what, where really threat hunting on top of that comes in, is a great solution. Now, if you don't have, the resources to do all of that, at a minimum, I mean, antivirus and automated defenses today, you have different tiers. It still has come a long way from where we were 10 years ago. Just using that, and even having one or two, analysts to monitor that, and to do the day-to-day hunting is a necessity if you're going to find advanced threats, insider threats, anything with a human that's got a goal and objective behind it. It requires a human, because like I said, not everything, we're past the days of where something just pops up and says, hey, this is bad. It just doesn't happen in
Right.
every case anymore.
Right. So there's I used to work at a threat intelligence company, and we had cutesy little names for our threat actors. Some use APT-28, like you had said. There's APT-1. You have Incontinent Bear, and all those out there like that, and
And yeah,
Slippery Weasel and whatever. Um, the so each one of these groups or orgs or countries, in this case, if they're a nation state actor, or actually there's crimeware actors
yeah,
now that they've got names for.
yes, they do.
Um, uh, do they know enough to? And this may sound like an ignorant question, but do they communicate with each other to coordinate attacks, or like, hey, we're over is like the old gang, block wars or something. It's like, oh, we're over here in the telecom sector. Leave this alone. Don't play with this, because I could imagine with as many threat actors as there were out there, you would be stepping on people's toes, or you would be finding shells that, oh, okay, well, the crimeware guys over here. Oh, Russia left us something in the back end here. Or do they communicate? Or say, hey, we're next week we're going to attack AT&T. Leave that alone. We'll share what we have with you. Do they share that kind of information, like anti-threat?
Yeah, so I did a research project in April of 21. I published the data from it, but it was into just this, looking into how criminal organizations shared resources, to what level they had relationships. And so we picked sort of the ransomware ecosystem, which is primarily Russia and Ukraine. Most of the core gangs were based out of Russia. A lot of the affiliate or hackers for hire, if you will, were in the Ukraine. And these guys work together, but they were different groups. And what we found was a lot of the hackers for hire, because there's only so many guys that are really good at hacking, they would sort of share and bounce between these groups. And what we did is we looked at sort of the how they were paid through cryptocurrency, and we would find some of the same wallets being paid by different gangs to them. So then we
Mm,
started to look at the resources, and what we found is there were sort of technical breadcrumbs that they left that sort of proved this sort of proof of concept that these guys did work together. And it was, what we found was there were a lot, like not just one or two. Like in one of the use cases, we found 5 groups that were working together, not only with the tools, but they were literally sharing victim data and posting that data to their own name and shame websites, and they were sharing infrastructure. Even some of the malware that they use, not the ransomware payloads, but some of your delivery malware that was unique and not publicly available, they were sharing those resources. So my point being is it is a much smaller ecosystem. And
mm,
now what I found is I've really gotten into fake personas and getting on the dark web, and getting involved with bad guys, and getting information from a human aspect as well. And what I found with that is a lot of these guys talk and work together, and some of them don't like each other, others do, but the point is they know one another, and it's just crazy. And I still think to this day a lot of organizations don't understand that, but that really does make it a bigger threat because of that organization, because of those resources. When one guy goes out because something happens and somebody else steps in to fill in, it's usually not just because they were there to go in. They already had their relationship, and they were already ready to sort of take that crown, if you will, to fill and to pay all these this affiliate program to keep that ecosystem going with all the money and the wheels churning.
okay. Um, so we I'm looking at chapter 3, and I see human driven ransomware. There are exploit kits, and there are ransomware. People create ransomware and sell it. So there's actually a secondary market for creating ransomware that people actually buy and then use themselves. Kind of like buying home equipment or something. we're Conti, but we're using, an Atheros chipset, or, we're using a wireless router from, D-Link, but it has an Atheros chipset in it. So they've built the kit for you to use somewhere else. Um, when ransomware is based on families, so they're different families, different TTPs. When
Mhm.
you say human-driven ransomware, is that pretty much phishing, or is there other human-driven ransomware out there?
Yeah, no. So what I mean by that is prior to 2015, the all the ransomware that we saw was, it wasn't targeted. It was basically spam campaigns where they hoped to hit individual users. Your home computer, give me $300, or a business computer, give me $500. As where today it's an organized effort where there's a human on the keyboard who's getting into your corporate network and spending anywhere from days up to 3 weeks. That's what we found anyway when we went and looked at our data and did a study on.
Right.
We picked like 5 groups, and they were spending all this time in their network. So it's somebody with hands on a keyboard in your environment, enumerating it, getting the administrative privileges, staging all the malware, turning all the ransomware, turning off security controls, and then finally executing the payloads across the board all at once. But it was a very organized operation that was driven by humans on a keyboard, and it used to not be. It used to just be, again, automated spam. If your security software caught it, that was it. So that's sort of the
Right.
difference. And we first saw that in 2015 with SamSam. That was really the first model that's still used today, where you saw, an organized group taking over an entire enterprise for a large scale ransom. Now that ransom's gone up from what it used to be, a couple 100,000, and today we see them, as high as, I think, Apple in 2021, there was like $50 million or something crazy.
Right.
It's definitely getting worse. But the point is, it all started very basic, and it's just evolved.
Okay. All right. So ransomware usually comes with a price tag. In this case, you've been infected by ransomware and you have to pay some kind of crypto, and Bitcoin being the most popular. The price of Bitcoin has dropped dramatically, and there is a lot of instability in the crypto market. And since, in the before times, for those of you who are listening to this, it seemed like ransomware first started using like e-gold, or the Russian e-gold stuff. If I'm incorrect, please feel free to correct me there, John. But what how is the volatility of the cryptocurrency market going to affect, ransomware in the future? Is it going to just, is it just going to be, well, they're just going to pay us more Bitcoin because it's worth less now, or what does it look like for the volatility of that market versus, and how it's going to affect the ransomware?
Yeah, well, I mean, so it's a great point there. So here's the thing. When I'm going to answer your question, but let me just add something to that. When a victim pays the ransomware payment, that money does not actually end up to where the ransomware criminal can use it for months. So the laundering process takes
Okay.
a lot of time. So the value before, up until like this year, the past several years, that's worked out for them because it's been going up. And now we're seeing the opposite, where it's going down. So because of that, now ransomware criminals really have to sort of forecast that for whatever they want. If they want to have something, let's say that's $5 million, they almost have to do that when it's worth. If it's worth 3.5 million, they have to ask for what they think or project it's going to be in 3 months to hit that. If it's
Wow.
going to be 5 million, and ask for that greater amount. So I think we're still sort of seeing that evolve, but yes, that's definitely something that is affecting the prices of the ransomware demands. But also remember, it's not just encrypting data anymore. Now they're stealing your data, so
Hmm.
they're doing double extortion, and they're seeing. Well, I'd say it's probably only 10 to 15%. We're seeing some groups even do a triple extortion, where they're also doing a distributed denial of service on top of that. So your computer data is locked, your sensitive data is stolen and being leaked and threatened to be published on the internet. And then your customers can't even get your infrastructure, because even if it is up, they're doing denial of service attacks. So I never blame companies who pay ransom anymore. Like I know the FBI and a lot of the federal agencies say never pay, but it's just not realistic for a business to make a decision that I'm going to go out of business because I'm not going to pay this. Like it's just not realistic anymore. So it's a big problem. I don't know what the answer is for that. But the other thing that I just want to throw out there with the Bitcoin currency is, when we saw dark side get when there was two attempts. One, there was an attempt by the U.S. government. It's Washington Post says it was Cyber Command that did an operation, went in, took control of a bunch of their servers, and were able to get the private key and take back a bunch of money that Colonial Pipeline had paid to them a couple weeks prior to that. And then it was the following month, we saw the FBI actually go and put in court paperwork, which is now posted on the Department of Justice website, where they actually did the same thing, but they actually asked to do it publicly before they did it. But the point is, in both situations, money was extracted, something that isn't supposed to be able to be done. So now, because these ransomware groups have done stupid things like affect, us being able to get gas on the East Coast, for a week, they've got national intelligence agencies, the intelligence community, and all these resources being used against them. So and on the forums, they're afraid of that. That's something they're like, okay, well, we made a mistake doing that, and there is a fear now because of that. In addition to when the FSB went in and kicked in 25 doors and arrested 14 people back in January with the REvil arrests, like that had never happened before. Now, granted, I get with Russia, that's probably never going to happen again, and that was sort of done to grease the wheels because they were planning to invade the Ukraine. They wanted to play nice with the U.S., but regardless of the reason, it had never been done before. So it's just, there's a different thought process and a different fear that is there that wasn't there a year and a half ago. And I will give, I'm not one to just say it. I will give, the U.S. a pat on the back for that, because I didn't think that was possible to even put a dent in sort of that ecosystem. And now we've got a lot of people looking over their back. Even with hiring affiliates now, there's such a process to ransomware affiliates. There's such a process now to vet them. When you go in to do an interview with them now, they ask you Russian folklore questions that are not on the internet, so you can't get answers to prove that you're a Russian national. Like, it's just crazy the things that they have to do now. So they're very paranoid. So that's a good thing for us.
Right. So
So,
in our last stream, there was a news story about Conti kind of falling apart because uh, apparently they're made up of folks from Ukraine and Russia and other countries, and like the leaders of Conti spoke up in favor of the Russian government, which apparently did not sit well with the Conti
right.
team, and so some data got leaked, and Conti, I don't want to say they split up or or what have you, but their tactics have changed to pretty much just a slash and burn operation now, and not so much ransomware. Given that some ransomware companies and companies, well, they are companies, aren't they? Organizations are starting to back governments in this case, or being a proxy for those governments. Um, are You mentioned, they're trying to prove their Russianness to each other in interviews, but are we going to continue to see that? Are we actually going to start seeing maybe ransomware groups attacking, for Western governments like the UK or even the US, or one of the Five Eyes groups? Are we going to start seeing potentially ransomware of Russia? And since the US has certain rules of engagement and Western organizations have rules of engagement, will we start seeing proxies being used in US government stead?
God, I hope so. I'd love to
Okay.
start
How do you really feel
seeing
about
us.
that?
I mean, it gets old just getting your ass handed to you every day, and that's what's happening with the ransomware attacks. The Conti story is a win, but it's not because anything that law enforcement or a government did. It's something that a lone researcher did, and that's my point. Sometimes you can go a lot farther without having your hands tied and letting sort of private sector community help you out with this stuff. So I would love to see that happen, to where we could do patriotic hacking back, because right now we can get punched in the face, but we can't punch back.
Right.
And so, yeah, it may not be a popular feeling, but that's all I do is see the worst of the worst with this stuff, and it gets old. But I don't think that's going to happen, but that I would love to see it happen.
Yeah.
What I do think, though, about like the Conti aspect, what you said, a lot of these groups, they run their organization like a business. And the Russia-Ukraine war is sort of the first time that we really saw your business model versus your patriotism being tested. And I think that because it was done at such a public level, with Conti, they had over 200 employees, and in those leaks, you had all of their conversations and chat logs and their business details of how they ran their operation. I mean, they were even doing recruiting on job employment websites. So it was run like a business. And
Right.
that structure and that huge employee base all fell apart because of those leaks. So yeah, they're still operating today from like a persona aspect, and they are. I mean, look at Costa Rica. You can't say they're not still being effective, but they're very different than what they were, and they're trying to hold on and bring that back. And they're on the ropes right now. I don't know whether they'll be here a year from now or not, but they're trying to hang on. But the point is that in my opinion, like law enforcement, U.S. government, when this stuff happens, we really got to capitalize on them. And when these guys are down, we need to hit them.
Right.
And at a classified level, maybe that's happening. I don't know, but I hope so, because we can't do it in the private sector. You can't do it as a lone individual legally. It's a felony to hack. And, so somebody needs to do something. So like I said, we are starting to see dents be made, but I don't think they're being made fast enough. So I hope that does change. And I hope that we continue to move forward with that. But it's just an area where we're not winning right now.
Right. So you mentioned that us, a private citizen such as myself, hacking back in this case would be considered a felony. Is that because it's being processed under CFAA, or is there another option there? Because we've
Yeah,
heard that the CFAA is now being relaxed for good faith kind of research. Could
right.
the CFAA be further relaxed if, yours truly was, ransomwaring, Putin's laptop or something like that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, so what they've relaxed is sort of that bug bounty aspect, but we haven't released we haven't really released a lot of the laws and regulations that would allow a company that's being targeted by a ransomware gang to hack back. They can defend themselves, but we can't hack back. Now it's rare that that's those prosecuted, but I guarantee you, if there was a big example, like a large company got caught doing it, that they would be made an example of by the government. They wouldn't let that go.
Right.
So corporations aren't going to do that or take that chance. And I get it. They shouldn't unless it's legal. But ransomware gangs and even espionage groups would think twice if organizations had really badass teams that could strike back. You would think twice, because right now they know we're not going to do anything. And obviously there would have to be regulation that it can't be the wild, wild west, but it would be nice whether it was something that was regulated or something that was monitored, or you had to get permission to do it or whatever, but something to allow us to progress forward so that we weren't quite as defenseless as we are right now when something happens.
Right. Yeah. My worry about people who want, and in this case, the people who've been hit in their own companies, and companies feel like, well, we should be able to hack back. I don't think that a company who has been ransomwared should be turning their own red team or their own defenders against, trying to hack back against those people. Cause I think there's really a lack of, you mentioned in chapter 5 here, analysis and attribution, unless you have a dedicated team
Right.
of that. And hopefully the people who are doing that attribution, or, doing the IR and gathering those TTPs, are smart enough to go, we shouldn't be doing this because they could hit us back even harder. And, uh, you don't want to hit the company and do the
Right.
hacking where you're at. So,
It's a great point. Yeah.
yeah,
Great point.
yeah,
Which is why I said it can't be the wild, wild west. I don't have the
right,
solution. I just feel like
right.
there needs to be something that allows it to be a step further. But yeah, it can't be the wild, wild west. Yeah, I don't have the right formula for that, but I feel like it needs to be more than what it is right now.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. All right. So let's go to chapter 5, and in this case, you're talking about analysis and attribution. And one of the first things that, if you follow enough people on InfoSec Twitter, they say attribution is hard. If it and
yes.
when it first started out, it was, oh well, there's Russian words inside the source code, so obviously I'm not saying it's Russia, but it's really hard because a lot of people want to make those assumptions where I could write code and just go to Google Translate and put in, drink more Ovaltine, and it would come out in whatever Russia is. And I would get people believing it's Russia, even though it might be just little old me. So is attribution more of a trend thing versus a time and like a singular event? Do you go over a period of time because they'll use the same playbook over and over again, or is it like a kind of a shoot from the hip kind of thing and hope that you're right?
Well, unfortunately, it's been so. First off, the attribution is near and dear to my heart. That's actually the first chapter that I wrote for this book because it's something I felt
Okay.
so strongly about, and we
All
don't do
right.
a great job of it today. But it's a lot better. But here's the thing: when attribution is done, when sort of the shooting from the hip scenario, it's usually done incorrectly. And like, there's a story I've got in the book about how one of the Russian intelligence units hacked a Chinese APT group, stole their source code, put some of that code into their own malware to throw investigators off. And when investigators first went in and they saw that unique code that had only been seen with China before, they were quick to blame China. And it actually ended up being Russia. So my point is, that's why in the book, I use actual analytical models for both doing like your analysis flow, like how to do your data, how to collect data, how to pivot off of it, how to do analysis, what to do with it once you have it, how to classify that data, how to assess the threat. And I use basically intelligence models that I learned in intelligence analysis school that I then altered to fit my workflow over the years from a cyber aspect that I found to be very effective and efficient. So I included those. So my attribution chapter is definitely opposite of shooting for the hip. It's how to do it in a very scientific and analytical way. And it provides theory and models and different things on how to do attribution. Everything from like time zone analysis to classifying your level of threat, to different attribution models that you can use again, and then just analytical models to go around that when you're doing your day-to-day investigations to help keep you honest, to stop an analyst from making an assumption, because that's where
Right.
it goes wrong. You can have an analytical theory that's not proven as long as you say that, but then when it comes to the actual your conclusion, when you're writing intelligence report, you need to have the evidence, and that evidence needs to take your conclusion, not what's in your head that you think, because it makes sense it's Russia, or it makes sense it's China, because that's where we end up wrong. And the problem is that once it's wrong, you can never take it back. You can change your PDF or change your website, but it's out there, and other
Right.
people are going to, even if they just remember it, they're going to base future attribution off of it, and it's snowball effect. It will be wrong. So it's a big problem, and it's something we have not done well in the private sector, and we need to really sort of follow the government's lead on that. And so anyway, that's my sort of hybrid between what I learned in the government and what I found myself dealing with in the private sector. And I just altered that to sort of fit. But yeah, that's what that chapter is about.
Okay. So you mentioned that we may have misattributed certain attacks back earlier, and we're basing some of our future decisions on that. Do you think that we're still doing misattribution, or have we gotten better at it in the past few years because there's just so much more in terms of TTPs or being able to classify things, or maybe the attribution market and press releases have just gotten more mature and more measured?
Yeah, I think that there's organizations like your CrowdStrikes, your Mandiants, that do a really good job with attribution. And a lot of those organizations have pulled away and hired, folks like myself that used to work for the government, and they're really experienced and they know what they're doing, and they also do attribution through analytical models and analytical theories, and they don't just throw it out there. So there are a handful of companies that are doing it well, and a lot of those companies are sort of leading the way in this space. So while it's slow, I do think we're gravitating towards better attribution, but it really comes down to the individual analyst at different companies, though, having the discipline to just not say and put out there that I think it's X or I think it's Y, and to have, like for leadership and management, to have, a structure and a discipline for how you do attribution and how you classify your threats, and how that information is then used and shared with other elements of your company, because it absolutely affects everything in your investigation if your attribution is wrong. Here's the thing: attribution helps us with profiling, because you can look at the history of a threat group, whether it's a history against your their own organization or what they did to different people in maybe in the same industry vertical. But that tells you where to look. That tells us what tools they like to use. That tells us the tactics that they prefer. So you can then dedicate your resources in the right places when you see that you're in the early phases of an attack. When that attribution is wrong, though, often we can do the same thing and put our resources in the wrong places, and then we're playing catch up, and or you just, the bad guys are successful, and you're just screwed at that point.
Right. So I asked the question about, do criminals communicate with one another in the underground about where they're attacking? I don't know if you know this, but do threat companies like the Mandiants and the CrowdStrikes actually coordinate their discussions so that way they're, Mandiants coming out and going, well, APT5 is, this, and, CrowdStrikes, no, it's, Lazy Panda or something like that. No, it's a Chinese actor. Do they actually collaborate on those things, or is it just, hey, we're the first ones to market, here's Lazy Panda, go with God or whatever?
So there is coordination, and there's a lot of a lot of analytical partnerships and even takedowns against certain threats that'll have multiple security vendors who work together. However, when it comes to attribution, I'm going to call it an 80-20, meaning 80% of it is in line, but then there's 20% that'll be different. So we might have, for example, you might have like a ransomware group that uses their specific ransomware payload, but then let's say they use like Wizard Spider, they use they're the Conti and Ryuk guys,
Right.
but they use TrickBot to deliver a lot of their ransomware and to do stuff inside of a network. Well, TrickBot has also been used, with like EvilCorp back when they used to do Dridex attacks, and a number of other groups. So in other words, one organization might attribute, this is controlled and developed by Wizard Spider, and another one might say, no, it's a third party, developer broker who, it's not out there for everybody to use, but he selects who can have these resources. So just because you see TrickBot doesn't mean that it's Wizard Spider. So my point is, like, they'll say that the actual attack, like using this payload, was the right actor, but they get a little bit in the weeds and some of the other attributes of an attack, which can lead to misattribution. So again, that's sort of an opinion that, and it's a well-educated opinion, and there's an argument that each of those vendors can make. And at the end of the day, only the attackers probably know the truth. But that's not as bad as when you misattribute a whole, entire attack or a threat or something to the wrong organization or the wrong country. That's more of, getting into the weeds of it, and it's not quite as bad, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, yeah. Each company is going to have their own threat intelligence feeds that are proprietary to them, and they're not going to be, releasing that secret sauce. But there's
Right.
been enough that's probably been published out there for an OSINT for the CrowdStrike or Mandiant to go, well, okay, let's double check, and there'll be write ups and stuff like that. So, um, you know, yeah, I was just trying to understand that from a layman's point of view here, because it does sound like a lot of these people treat the intelligence as a product, or like, hey, look at what we got here, we're the top dog, we know the things that we're buy our shit. And it's a little it seems like that they're trying to sell that information as a way to invest in their product. So
Well, and that's a
yeah.
problem. It is, and we're not going to get past it, but that is a problem, that we are doing it to make a profit at the end of the day. And there's no way that doesn't influence certain aspects. I mean, I think CrowdStrike's really good at what they do, and they have a really cool marketing, plan around their bad guys, and they do illustrations and everything else, and it's really cool. But at the same time, like, that wouldn't happen if it wasn't business driven and there wasn't, dollars behind it, to
Right.
make it cool and trendy. It doesn't mean they don't do a good job, but I'm just saying business definitely influences it. And for example, like when we do a lot of the free reports that companies put out, the stuff that they're not charging for, that's based off of what we think is going to get readers. That's who we're going to think,
Right.
what's going to draw in customers. So I might have this great intelligence product, and I think it'd be awesome to put out there. But if that's not going to attract the right customers to meet our sales demand for whatever our quota is, we're not going to put that out. We're going to put something else out that may not be as useful, but fits those specific, industry verticals that we're trying to attract customers. So it definitely does have an effect. It's not the overarching or everything end of the day scenario, but it definitely does affect attribution in how what we do publicly and what we release that people read for free.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Um, so I want to go down to chapter 7 here. One of the things you had mentioned before we started was that you love the open source tooling out there for various things. And, malware analysis is something that I don't want to say everybody can do, but it is definitely something you can do when you read enough and not infect yourself. There, you can do things like running VMs or what have you.
Right.
And so there are numerous open source pieces of software out there for analyzing malware. Do you have any favorites, and why do you use them?
So the one of the I'm not a reverse engineer. So one of the things that I try to teach in the book is how to really take advantage of a lot of the resources that are out there for malware analysis and get to, it's not going to be the same level, but near the same end result. And things like, well, there are a lot of commercial repositories and free repositories, or some that have both. Most of them have both models, where you get certain accounts will give you certain resources for free, where others charge. But for example, you could use VirusTotal hybrid analysis, and you can get a ton of information about malware. But let's say that it doesn't analyze it right. You can download like Cuckoo Sandbox, which is completely open source and free, and is, to be honest with you, is my favorite malware resource. And you can run samples on your own and change all the variables and do things to entice the malware to run correctly. And then you get this nice automated report that gives you a lot of the information that you need. So, and then taking those results, that's one of the things, again, that I teach in the book, is how to read those results from those automated reports and what they mean, and how to pivot on them to get to the next piece of the attack, and then put it all together in the end. But there's also open source tools like the Harvester or Recon NG they're free also, that really help you to collect information, whether it be on infrastructure, whether it be on a username or an email account or even a person's name. And you'd be amazed when once you learn how to use these tools, how much information you can collect. So when you take that, and then you take what you get from, again, using some of the dynamic malware reverse engineer malware tools that are out there, you just end up with all of this data. So learning how to take that and make it into intelligence, and to know which pieces are important and what they mean, and combine all of that, you can really unravel the story of your attacker and what you're looking at. And that's what I try to convey in the book. This is not just my job, it's a passion of mine. Like, I love what I do. So I really wanted to sort of share what I've learned over the years, because it sucks. I'm not smart enough to be a reverse engineer. I suck at math, but I still need to do my figure out how to do this stuff. And because it was a hobby first, I didn't have the money to go buy, $5,000 or $8,000 a month for VirusTotal, whatever they charge now. I had to figure this stuff out on my own. So I wanted to share that with people, so people that are interested and want to have a curiosity and want to go do it could go do the same thing that I did.
That's cool. I guess I guess I'm a bit confused why somebody would want to, in private society, want to analyze the malware. I mean, for only, I get it when you have a job and you're working as a SOC analyst or what have you. Um, is it just the hacking part, or the curiosity of how they built the thing in the first place? I mean, what motivated you to do this outside of your, well, job before you got a job? I mean,
Yeah.
is it, there's got to be a skill set, or just I don't know. Please feel free to elucidate.
Yes, it's a puzzle, but it all comes back to finding the human behind it. That's what makes it so interesting. And I'll give you a great example. There was malware out there that, this was back when it was a hobby. There was malware out there that I found, that I had read about. It was used in attack, and I went through, and I'm just going through all the strings that are in the malware. And in that, I found this. It was a handle, and it was like YYT hack, and it was this guy he put it in all of his malware. Well, I was then using OSINT tool, and so I found that by doing dynamic analysis. Okay, so the low hanging fruit. I wanted to see if there was something unique in there that I could use to pivot on to gain more information about the actual attacker behind it. So finding that, I was able to pivot on that, and I went through, started going through. I got led to some forums that were in Mandarin, but they were like programming and hacker forums, and that sort of looking through that led me to a university, and I found a professor who he had an email address that was associated with one of his accounts that was YYT hack, and then I found out that a lot of the Chinese government and military were trained at the same college. Then I also found out the same college sponsored some of their hacking competitions for the military and the government there. So putting it all together, just by that one string that I found, allowed me to put a human being, his face, his hobbies, profiling him, all of his accounts, his family. I mean, I didn't go put all that out there for people, but I found it all. Like, that is super interesting to me, to just take, here's an attack I read about in the news, and now here I am, down the road, where I've figured out everything that you could do that, usually you probably would only see in like an intelligence report or something, from the government. And I was able to figure out as a hobby at home. So it was really cool, and it's exciting, and it's a puzzle, and it's fun. So I don't know if that's answers your question, but that's what sort of drove me to do it. And I think there's a lot of people that get in this field because they have sort of that same interest. I'm super passionate about what I do. And I think that that's really what your best analysts are the same. Like, they love the work, they love the chase, they love the hunt, they love the puzzle.
Yeah, and I would imagine if you're analyzing it yourself, you can actually follow up with, attribution, or, like Krebs, where he's outing people or doxing, oh, this,
Yeah.
this malware, these malware agents or these malware folks for this group are doing whatever, you can work that. I would imagine you want to make sure you're insulating yourself from the world,
Yeah.
create proper OPSEC. The bad guys don't do it very well, but you actually need, you being you, the guy who plans on doing, or plans on doing malware, needs to insulate themselves from the rest of the world.
Yes.
Yeah, proper OPSEC on your end is going to protect you from, reprisal if you decide you want to publish findings or what have you. So,
Can I jump in here real quick? Because you just hit a
sure.
really important point. A lesson that I learned the very, very hard way is, you find all that information about a bad guy, you do not go to post that stuff all over the internet. I did that, and I had both threats against my life well, I'm not even going to get into who they were, but then I had the FBI show up at my work.
Oh,
I pissed off everybody.
yeah.
So the point is that you can talk about a threat, you can do attribution to a certain level, but there's sort of like, I'm going to call it an unwritten code. Like, don't go post people's pictures and their family members and all their social media and everything else.
Yeah.
You don't want that done to you. And like, there's got to be a certain level of, people are going to like I'm saying this, but a certain level of respect to not do that. But you have to do that for your own safety.
Yeah.
So you just got to be smart about that.
You're not Brian Krebs. Don't try to be.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
So we have a question from our stream. Digital Warhead, one of our regulars, says, if we're talking about cyber warfare, I have a question. We've heard a lot about both offensive and defensive cyberware with both Russia and Ukraine, but I haven't really heard much about what some of the other major cyber countries, really, Digital Warhead, drank, like the US and Israel, are playing in the cyber war, probably intentionally, but I'm curious if John has any input into what role the US is doing in both helping Ukraine and attacking Russia.
Well, okay. So as far as what we're doing to help the Ukraine, I can talk about because I'm not with the government anymore. And if I was, I wouldn't be able to talk about it. But because I'm not, I can tell you from my past experience what I think that we were probably doing. I'm sure we're giving them, intelligence on things that we find. I'm sure we're using some of our resources to help them. But I don't think that we're doing like we did with Iran with the Stuxnet, and you believe whichever version of that you'd like. But most people today believe that the US was behind Stuxnet, where we, put malware into their nuclear power plants to affect their centrifuge systems. And, I don't think we're doing it to that level, but I do believe we're probably using some of our secret squirrel resources to gain intelligence, to give them a heads up that, hey, this is happening, or there's, going to be what we see movement with whether it's troops or missiles or whatever it might be, or, hey, we've got, intercept some communications and there's 5 guys that have been released into Kyiv that are going to be looking for a certain person, whatever it might be. I'm sure we're helping them with aspects like that, but I don't think that we are going in and like trying to shut down command and control systems that Russia is using to launch attacks against the Ukraine. And the reason we're probably not is because they have a nuclear weapon capability. So if they didn't have that, we'd be doing a lot more, regardless of the administration or your politics. If that wasn't the case, we would be doing a lot more. But because of that, you have to have some boundaries, and it sucks, but you have to have some boundaries, and you got to operate smart. And that's not, I'm not even getting into my opinion what we should or shouldn't do. I'm just saying that's a fact that you have to do that. So I do think we play a role, and I do think we help, and I do think there's stuff that it doesn't hit the news that we do to sort of support their operations in the Ukraine, from an intelligence gathering aspect. But I don't think it's anything like where we're releasing secret squirrel malware to shut down systems and alter the effort of the way the war is going, or things like that.
Sure, sure. We were talking about malware samples. I put about 5 or 6 different links in the stream chat, and I'll put those in the show notes for the audio podcast, where you can actually go and get malware samples. Now, don't be stupid. Go to those sites knowing there's real live malware there. You're going to download malware. So don't download it directly to your desktop and open up an exe file. Okay. So you've been warned. Stupid people play stupid games and win stupid prizes. So that's just what you need to know. I've been saying that a lot more recently because there's been a lot of people that have infected themselves. And I think I actually saw that. There was a news story about the way they found a ransomware actor was he actually infected himself with his own malware.
Oh, wow.
I'll have to find that story, but yeah, they found him because somebody took control of the C2 and then like went back and was like, oh, we're on the hacker's system. Oh, that's because he's got a Cobalt Strike beacon on his system that he did not know about.
Yeah, I got a lot. I can't tell them, but I got a lot of stories and that where we've seen that happen with espionage groups that have done exactly that, or they take it home with them to try to use it for criminal purposes to get money for themselves, like to moonlight.
Right.
They infect themselves and screw themselves, and we end up catching on because of that. So it definitely happens. It's just not always reported.
Not every hacker is a smart hacker, and will own them, get themselves owned. So yeah,
Everybody's going to make a mistake. It's just how big of a mistake you make. So you just got to be really careful so that when you do make that mistake, the damage is minimized.
Yep, yep. Um, the last thing I want to talk about before we go, you have Appendix A and B here about threat profile questions and a template. For those people who haven't bought the book yet, including myself, what is in the threat profile questions, and who is that tailored for? Is it tailored for a business or for a person, or what is the end goal of those templates and those questions?
So threat profiles are for security analysts. So here's the purpose of making a threat profile. So it is based off of the behaviors, the personas, the TTPs, that the group's going to use, what tactics that they like, what malware they like, the things that their go-to. As humans, we like to use certain tools and repeat certain things. So you can collect that information, and a threat profile needs to be short, like 1 or 2 pages. But the goal is to be able to give that to your analyst. Remember, 90% of the stuff that they see is not that advanced stuff. So what we want to do is make them familiar enough with some of these advanced threats so that when they see something that's suspicious, a little bell goes off, and they're like, "Huh, that's familiar. What? I think I read one of those threat cards or those threat profiles on it." And so they escalate it in time earlier than they would have. It's to minimize the time from when we see something to when we realize it's the beginning of an advanced attack. It's to get a human being comfortable and more knowledgeable about these threats. So they got to be short. I like to equate it to, and this will show my age, when I was a kid, I played with the G.I. Joe toys, and on the back of the box, when you buy one, they'd have a card that told you what guns they used, what their past mission was, who their affiliations were, and that's exactly what a threat profile does. It gives us a human persona and their preferences of their attack preferences that are associated with them. And it's interesting too, when you have sort of like an encyclopedia of bad guys, and each business is going to have different threats that are important to them. So you don't got to focus on everything, but if let's say you're in the energy business, or let's say you're COVID research, like there's going to be specific groups and entities that are known that target those industries. So those are the ones you want to be really familiar with. So it is manageable. It's not like you got to know every single, bad guy group that's out there, but knowing, let's say your top 10 that targets your vertical, it's gonna put you ahead of the game.
Yeah, that's good. And you mentioned COVID research. I mean that became a huge deal. If biopharmaceutical company is was figuring out the next vaccine or what have you, that was not only would the bad guys have that, but they would share it with their own governments, or make it impossible for the company with the leading edge research to do so, or to make headway on that. So that makes a lot of sense. So you mentioned TTPs. Is there any specific framework y'all use? Because MITRE has one, has the attack, it has the defend framework, it has the other one that is just, I think, used to sell endpoint security products. But what do you have a specific classification system you use, or do you just use MITRE?
Yeah, MITRE owns that space. I mean, I'm not saying there's no competitors with them, but that's where the industry's gone. Every analyst I know, every company that I work with, every job interview I've been on in the past several 5 years, whatever it's been. I've only been on one job interview in the past 5 years, but you get what I'm saying. Like, everybody uses that attack framework. You go look at job ads, they always have the MITRE attack framework listed. I mean, it's just something that is, we needed a standard. So they created a good one. It can be a pain in the ass, to be honest with you, as an analyst,
Mm,
but it works and it's effective, and I'm glad that they made it.
right.
And it was a bigger problem when we didn't have one. So I think that it's a good thing. But yeah, that's sort of the standard. I don't see that changing. What hasn't picked up as much as sort of your sticks and your taxi to sort of communicate that those indicators that are associated with those attacks in a common format. MITRE was behind that too. That has not caught on as well, but the framework for our TTPs and attack behaviors and things like that has absolutely caught on, and that's, again, much needed. So that's a great thing that they put that together, and they did a really good job doing it. And what's the best thing about that is they used the industry to sort of create that. So there's analysts from companies all over the world. When you go look at the credit for a lot of the actual aspects of the framework, come from threat research that's published
Hmm.
publicly, where there's some new novel technique that was found that they now adapt into their framework. So it's really cool how they did that and got everybody sort of involved.
Nice. Okay. So I don't want a shot across the bow into the industry, but we've had a number of podcasts with certain groups and certain organizations that are trying to get threat intelligence information out to various industry verticals. The one that I think needs the most help is education, security, higher learning, even elementary, grade school, secondary, high school, etc. And the problem isn't a lack of threat intelligence; it's a lack of resources. But that's neither here nor there. Um, do Should companies that deal in threat intelligence do what they can, and this is rhetorical probably, but should they do more outreach with these ISACs and with these other organizations, or are they already doing enough? And it's just the ISACs realize that they can only do so much before the threats actually become real.
Now, I think that the ISACs are a great way to get involved, to help protect yourself, help get more information and knowledge. I mean, let's think about this. If Whether it's education, whether it's gas, whether it's whatever, those industries have. You're being targeted by a lot of the same bad guys and the same threats that are unique to your vertical. So by being part of those industries, and trusting that you can share information and that others are going to share back with you, you can learn how to defend yourself better. And it's, again, it's not something that costs you money, that we're having have to have this robust security budget to take part in. So it's right there for you to use, and it is very helpful, especially from a human aspect of learning about these threats, and understanding and collaborating and working with other organizations that might have greater resources or lesser resources, but their lessons learned and what they saw, and it's a no-brainer to use those. And that's actually something that over the years have really improved, and I'm a big fan of. And I think it'd be great if more organizations got involved, but they have definitely, it's it's gone up in popularity, and the
Mm.
amount of organizations that are taking part are growing every day. And I think that's very important that we continue that.
Yeah. When I was in Austin back in 2013, 2014, I'd go to things like InfraGard, and you get those reports back in the day, and you know I was following a lot of people on Twitter, and my threat intelligence feed was Twitter because it was faster,
Yeah,
and I think InfraGard's gotten better in the last few years, but it was like all of the information was really vague and not actionable. It was like, "Oh, be on the lookout for ransomware from some actor that is, insert generic term here." And it's like, that doesn't help me. I've already found out about this. I was already hit by this, 3 weeks ago. So I believe InfraGard has gotten a little better and a little faster in releasing, more actionable information. But yeah, I still worry about certain industry verticals that are um, uh, not quick enough to move because they lack resources. And I don't know what the answer to that is, but we've had the EduSec ISAC folks on about that, and it's really hard because there's such a soft target, and there's such great information from being able to borrow kids' social security numbers before they even have a chance to have a credit rating, and then have it
right.
runt, because you won't find out until 10 years later or whatever, when somebody goes to apply for a credit card or for a college loan or something. So I guess there's no good answer to that, but I see that as something's going to have to change if we keep having breaches of education in secondary schools, and ransomware as well, because they're really they're really financially tied to um, uh, the resources are financially restrained, I think, in many cases, so it's a problem.
I think that
But
the education, one of the bigger problems is ease of use is usually the path taken over hardened security, and a
yeah,
lot of it because you have, and this isn't, I was young once too. You have younger people that they either want to have an easy access to their information or their data, or you have, just the school itself that doesn't put an emphasis on security. But at the end of the day, we have to sort of take away some of the ease of use and make it more secure before we're going to see that change.
yep, cool. Any questions from the people in the chat? While I'm waiting, John. It's been a great having you on the show, on the broadcast here. This book is available on NoStarch Press: The Art of Cyber Warfare, and an Investigator's Guide to Espionage, Ransomware, and Organized Cybercrime. 241 pages of goodness, minus the table of contents maybe, but it's a good value. You can get the print book and the ebook, or for a little cheaper you can get the ebook, which comes in PDF, Mobi, and EPUB. One thing I like about No Starch is they have DRM free PDFs, which is
Right.
both a blessing and a curse. I get it.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, but they do a lot of great work with a lot of different things. But John, how would people find you if they wanted to talk more about threat intelligence? Maybe they want to reach out to your organization to, see what offerings you might have, or just to talk about threat intelligence or malware in general.
Yeah. So I work for Analyst One, and I'm also on LinkedIn, and I'm on Twitter. I don't know. I could pass you that information if you want to post that. But yeah, I'm definitely out there on social media. Well, I only do social media for work, so it's LinkedIn and Twitter. I don't do social because of what I do, and,
Right.
and I put my name on everything I do, so I get targeted a lot. I have like 3 identity protection services at all times.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely am available, and that's my job these days. Is I sort of pivoted from being sort of like a threat hunter or intelligence analyst. I do research, and we publish it. Everything I do I publish publicly. I do a lot of thought leadership, conferences, talks, just sharing information, trying to help and train analysts, advising companies when they're being hit by ransomware, or they're just trying to prepare or figure out the best routes to take against threats. um, so anyway, I'm definitely available, to help. In a lot of the stuff that I do, I do for free, just because I love what I do and I want to help people.
Okay. We do have one question here. Super Lolly, another one of our regulars. Appreciate that. He says, "Do you think public and small medium businesses need to know how to protect against advanced persistent threats? Because I doubt they gave it any thought as compared to just protecting their network and following governance."
Yeah, well, just following governance, we've seen where that gets you. That just doesn't work. That's the problem. You could be a small mom and pop shop. You could be a huge corporation. You could be a small state government or a hospital or whatever. It doesn't matter anymore whether it's a nation state, whether it's a ransomware group. I mean, you're at risk, and it's like I hate being like the doom and gloom guy, but where we're at, it's been getting worse and not better, and it just people just got to take it more seriously. We You don't need to have, I guess I keep saying this, but you don't need to have a huge security budget. You can be more secure just by being knowledgeable and hardening your own networks yourself. I mean, it's really not rocket science to get to a certain level. Yeah, sure, the threat hunting and everything else that might be different, but just following like the governance of, hey, you should secure this or that, you need to take it further. You need to take an interest. I mean, it's your livelihood. You need to do a little bit more than that. But without specific examples, it's kind of hard to really put a specific format to better that. But yeah, you don't need a ton of money to get better, but governance by itself and just following the bare minimums just doesn't cut it anymore.
Right. Okay. So, John, one last thing before we go. You had mentioned, and this will not go out on the podcast, but you're going to be speaking at a couple of events soon. Are you going to be at RSA or anything like that?
I will be at RSA. I'm not speaking this year at RSA. I'll be at the Splunk conference, and I am doing a talk there the following week. And I have a conference in between there that I'm doing tomorrow as well. But yeah, I won't be talking yet. I won't be talking at RSA this year. I did 2019, and I think in 2020 we were all home. So this is sort of its
Okay.
first year back. So we'll see how it goes.
Oh, very cool. Yeah. On our last stream, on our last podcast, Miss Berlin is going to be speaking at RSA. She's going to be at a panel. She said, I think Monday morning at 8:30 a.m. on IoT security, and then she's going to be speaking Tuesday evening on Sysmon and stuff. She does quite a bit of what you do with threat intelligence and gathering TTPs for ATPs. We're really happy that she's going to be at the conference. So I'll remind her that you're going to be there, and maybe you can look out
Yeah,
for
it'd be
if
great.
that's you know. So I've
Yeah,
never
no,
been
I'd
to
love to.
RSA, so I don't know how big it is.
It's huge, man. It's an
Really?
awesome
Okay.
conference. Yeah, it's one of my favorites. Yeah, I love going to it. So they've got a
Right on.
good content and lots of companies, lots of good networking, and always have interesting talks. And ransomware is a big one there that they always have interesting content on.
Okay. All right. Well, John, thank you so much. I know you got to go because it's late East Coast time, and you need to get your rest for tomorrow. But thank you so much for coming on our BreakSec broadcast here, and hope you have a good day and take care.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been great.
Cool. All right. Well, that was it. You can, if you'd like to drop off and go, you can. I'm just going to close up shop here for the night. Yeah, thanks again.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Take care.
Cool. All right, later.
Later.
All right, everybody. Well, that was John. Hope everybody enjoyed that discussion. I really wish that I did malware analysis, and I'm trying to alleviate that. I'm trying to work on the topics and issue tools and things that I'm not very strong with. So we are. Thank you, Digital Word. I appreciate the positive feedback there. Yeah, a lot of times it's just me seeing people say things on Twitter, like what John. He was like, "Hey, here's my book. Go get my book." And I was like, "Hey, wait, come on our show and talk about your book." And he's not one to turn down promotion because it's his book, kind of like we did with Miss Berlin when Defensive Security Handbook came out. We're always on the lookout for authors who are putting out things. But yeah, we're actually I'm actually talking, and I had a meeting earlier today with CyberSec Diva at CyberSec Diva. Oh no, that's the wrong one. CyberSec DIVA. Okay, just there we go on Twitter. To do a course on malware analysis and reverse engineering. We're going to actually set up a lab with Remnux. We're going to set up um, uh, Cuckoo Sandbox, like some of the stuff that John had talked about, some of the open source stuff using VMware Player, and we're gonna do a class on this. I want to learn more on identifying threats and convincing management these threats exist. That's a hmm. So super. Let me ask you a question. Is are you does management not believe that they are worth being hacked? Because I can understand that's like well, we're just a smaller medium business. Who would want to hack us? I understand that that's a nice hackneyed phrase that management has. It's like we're not important enough. Well, eh, may I suggest something like a guest command that a bot will provide links to the related guest? Yeah. Let me, John. DiMaggio, I didn't even bother to ask if he was any relation to the other person. So that is not him. This is not that person. I believe so. This is John's. That's John. So I'm gonna go ahead and connect with him. The one thing is sometimes on LinkedIn, if there's no connect button, if you go to the more, the connect button will be right there. Little hint. So John, thanks for joining me tonight on the BreakSec broadcast. Appreciated your insights. All right, so sorry, little self improvement there. Did it? Oh wait! Don't do that! Don't do that! All right. Yeah. He's. Let me go. Let me pull up my other screen here. I'd actually tweeted it out on Twitch or on TweetDeck. His I think it was John underscore DiMaggio. Um, let me double check that. I would love to do an at guest. The problem is sometimes these go by the seat of our pants. So I'm yeah, John underscore DiMaggio. Okay, so you can find him. There you go. All right. There it is. So he is yeah, that's him right there, Digital Warhead. Good catch there. Yeah. It's underscore DiMaggio. I was looking for underscore. That's not good. And of course you can get his NoStarch book. Um, so yeah, I love talking about this stuff, but yes, we're going to be starting that on June 21st. So the idea is, we're going to start at ground zero. We're going to set up a lab using Remnux. We're going to use VMware Workstation Player to make sure that it's free. I have double checked with CyberSec Diva to make sure that everything can be ran in one VM, because I believe VMware Workstation Player will only run one VM. Now, if the idea is we're trying to be all the same across the environment. If we're talking about my management, they just think having insurance in case of problem is enough, but the end premium is a bit steep because we can't provide certain information they want. You know what? That's so super. I don't know if you were on during our discussion with Ming Lim, who is the VP of product at Digital Defense by Help Systems, but she was telling us that a lot of insurance companies are tired of paying out for companies that don't do their due diligence or do care. So, a lot of companies are just what was it? I forget what the name. There was a damn. It was there was a term I saw. It was like havoc something, but it was like when a company buys insurance and thinks that all of their problems are just going to go away and they don't have to worry about anything if they get breached. There was a specific term for that, and I wish I had that website, but there are going to be a lot of insurance companies that are not going to pay on breach premium or their breaches because they're going to want to know if the company's actually got security controls into place, or the insurance company is going to ask, you got hit by ransomware and you're down for 5 days, and you want us to pay to get your, you want us to pay your 50 Bitcoin to get, your information back. Where are the backups? Well, we don't have backups. Well, best practice, not realistic. I mean, why, why have I not seen or heard any revolutionary backup solutions? Nobody seems to be wanting, I haven't seen or heard of a good backup solution in years. Is it just because the technology for that is stagnated, or is it just not cool to sell backup solutions? Oh, yeah, I was on that talk as well. But yeah, now the insurance ask a bunch of questions to establish baseline. Good. They should. Um, not attacking you directly, Super Lolly, but insurance companies, are going to have to do their due diligence, or every breach is going to be like a hurricane when it comes through, right? Um, what if yeah, it's gonna be rough. I mean, insurance companies are finally wising up and realizing, hey, we're being taken advantage of, and it's going to eat into our profits if they don't do. You know, they could spend $1 million on a backup solution, or some kind of backup solution in the cloud, in the cloud, um, and instead of us paying. Oh, okay. Um, Super Lolly says, "No problem, it's not my company." But yeah, I mean, insurance companies are going to ask, what your controls are in place, right? And if you aren't even doing regular backups, I don't know if companies are doing backups. Is that a cool thing that people do anymore, or is it just? I mean, it it's funny because the one thing that they tell you when you're making backups is you should be testing them, but I don't. We did backups when I worked in IT, but we never tested them. So we don't even know if they were actually any good, right? Or if they were being done properly. And this was back when you used DAT tapes. I wasn't even using anything like AWS Glacier, or Glacier, if or some kind of backup like that. AWS Glacier, I believe, is fairly cheap. I'm sure Google has something similar to that, where you can just back up raw data, not to an openly public S3 bucket, but yeah, I definitely see some more due diligence here, especially if we have another Target or another Solar Winds or something like that, where people are just getting owned left, right, and center. So, um, anywho, uh, yeah, I'm glad everybody enjoyed the show, the broadcast today. Um, but yeah, so the class we're going to do with CyberSec Diva is going to start on the 21st of June. We're going to try to do it. I That's the one thing I did not talk to her about, was number of times in a week. Or not in a week. Ugh, sorry, is it going to be weekly? Is it going to be every 2 weeks? Twice a week? I mean, I got to figure out what the duration and whatever it is, but we're gonna set up Remnux. We're gonna set up Waza. We're gonna set up Cuckoo Sandbox. We're gonna set up Gidra. We're gonna analyze some malware, and some of the links that I posted in the stream chat earlier were stuff that I'd already looked up earlier with her, because I was like, well, what malware samples are we going to use? And CyberSec Diva, was like, well, we'll just get some stuff, and I was like, here's 5 sites that have a bunch of stuff on them. So, but like I said earlier, if you click on any of these links um, that were in the list here, Malware Traffic Analysis is a really good site. It's like there's PCAPs with malicious stuff in them. Let me see what some of the other ones. InfoSec Write-Ups has a malware sample sources. Any.run has malware samples and reports. Excuse me. Sorry. Cyberlab.pacific.edu has some malware samples for students. Um, but yeah, be careful with those, playing with those. Only explode them in a VM, and only explode them in a VM that doesn't have any network connectivity, just in case. And better off put it on a standalone laptop with no network connectivity, and that way you can be safe. Or safer. So. Hmm. You know what? Let me double check. Let me double check. Cybersec. Yeah. Yeah, there she is. Yeah. Okay. There you go. That's her. And we're gonna set all that up, and I'm gonna be a student because I'm going to learn something. I've been wanting to learn Gidra forever. I've never used Remnux, Cuckoo Sandbox, or Waza. So, oh, that's okay. Actually, you mentioned on Twitch, one of the things that she's wanting to do is to get her own stream set up so that she can do these on the reg herself and do additional content, which I'm going to help out with because I don't, I learn through helping. So, I'll only get better with my own stream by doing that too. So, Digital Warhead, I will be probably helping her get her stuff set up. Um, so Super Lolly, I put it up there. The post, twitter.com/cybersec diva. So, yeah. So yeah, you can go check that out. Anyway, yeah, we're gonna mix it up and do some malware, and I fully expect to get owned. I'll be analyzing malware. I'll probably have to get my Surface Book or Surface Pro 3 out because I don't want to actually do it on this box. Trying to analyze malware on the box that I'm doing streaming on is probably not a good idea. So, uh, I have my I had my there. Got my Elgato HD60 S Plus, and I'll be doing the analyzing of malware, and she'll be sharing her screen. So keep an eye out on that. We'll put some posts up and push that out. VODs will be available here for subscribers and followers, so they can catch up with the show if they are with the broadcasts and the classes if they'd like. Um, Otherwise, you'll have to catch the show if you don't follow and sub that way. So, anyway, I'm going to go. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And I'm going to sign off for tonight. I'm not going to be on tomorrow. I probably be on Thursday, and depending on if it's raining or not, we're supposed to go camping for the long holiday weekend here for Memorial Day. But if it's going to rain, we're probably not going to go camping. So if it's raining, I'll be on. If it's not, probably won't be. So, but I will try to do some. If I go camping, I'm going to try to do a stream, tethered to my phone at the campsite because that's where we're doing InfoSec camp out. So I want to test and see if we can do streaming from the campsite with a cell phone connection. So I'm gonna go check that out and see how well it works. So other than that, hope everyone has a great week. Take care of yourselves and be kind to one another. Find your empathy, and we'll talk to y'all soon. See y'all. Bye.